Most people today feel isolated, miserable, or anxious, and we turn to our phones, delicious foods, shopping, or drugs to feel better. But the medicine we need is in something much simpler.
Something we all have access to that doesn't cost any money, and most importantly, something that can help us end the cycle of misery and anxiety and stress and suffering in the first place. Hey Adventure Buddy, I'm Sarah. In this video, I'm going to show you the science of drugs versus nature when it comes to your mental and physical health so that you can balance both to live a life of joy and resilience. Notice I said balance. You don't have to choose between drugs and nature, but don't tell your mom I said that. But to understand your human, joyful, resilient life, first, you need to understand rat life. Yes, we're going to talk about rats and addiction. And even if you don't relate to rats or addiction, first of all, good for you. You're doing great. But second of all, this is actually really important for the key takeaway at the end, and it's honestly fascinating. So let's talk about Rat Park. There's a psychologist named Dr. Bruce Alexander, and he ran what's called the Rat Park experiment. You had two groups of rats. Okay, in group one, you had rats that were each in individual cages, and they had two water feeders. One, just water. The other one, water with drugs in it. They're in this little box, they have two waters, and of course they go for the drug water, and it gives them dopamine, it makes them feel good. That's the feel-good chemical, so they kept doing drugs, and to the point that they became addicted, they suffered in all the ways, and some even died. But on the other group of rats, they were in a place called Rat Park. Just a disgusting thing if you think about what that means. But in Rat Park, they had a natural environment. Okay, it was more like their natural nature environment. They had other rats to play with, and they had games and toys. They were able to be creative and explore and play, and they had the same options for water: regular water, water with drugs in it, aka regular, basic, boring water, and dopamine water. And despite it being just as addictive and just as available, the rats in Rat Park chose to drink regular water. And what this tells us is that these behavioral problems we have that right now we try to medicate with prescription drugs, they're not actually about the substance. They're not actually about the bad thing. They're about the environment. If your environment makes you miserable, you are more likely to seek cheap dopamine, whether that's illegal drugs, legal drugs like, well, there's a whole list. This is what our country profits off of. Or things like scrolling, like swiping through faces, hoping you're finding your soulmate, or overnight shopping, or gambling, or my personal weak spot, food. But we're better than rats, right? Like humans, we're better than rats. In my experience, no. In my early 20s, I felt a lot like a rat in a cage for reasons I won't talk about. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. I was really scared. I was really anxious. I was really depressed. I couldn't sleep. My body was like I exercised, but like nothing. There was no sense of well-being, despite living in a world externally that looked amazing. My life looked amazing, but I was really, really unhappy and really considered taking some antidepressants, or actually, my therapist at the time told me I should, but I did something else instead. It's something you can do. It's something all of us can do, regardless of what kind of shape we're in, how much money we have. And it's what humans have done throughout time for a sense of wellness. It's what I call primal wellness. Do you like that word, by the way? I made it up. That's my term. It's my thing. Let's talk about it. And it didn't just work for me, it worked for veterans of the Vietnam War. Now, during the Vietnam War, 15% of soldiers became addicted to heroin, one of the hardest, worst, most addictive drugs of all. And there was this huge concern that they would come home to their families as broken, drug-addicted men. But what happened, well, and women, I think, were there women? I don't know, but soldiers. What happened is that when they came home to an environment where there was connection, there was more creative stimulation, and most importantly, peace, the sound of trees, the sound of wind, birds chirping. They didn't need to go to rehab. They didn't go through withdrawal. They just stopped using heroin. Their environment made all the difference, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Now, as far as I know, you and I are not actively in a war on heroin, and we are certainly not rats in a cage. But statistically speaking, we are more miserable and more into legal and illegal drugs than we have ever been. But our environment, this doesn't make sense, right? Like everything's more comfortable and more convenient. We have so much to make our wellness good. But when we outsource our comfort and our courage, we lose the joy and strength of the human spirit. The problem isn't what we have, it's what we've lost, which is where primal wellness comes back into the picture. So instead of building our equivalents of Rat Park, environments that give us creative stimulation, a sense of genuine connection and community, we build environments that are based off comfort and digital connection. We've essentially created digital cages. We modern humans, especially in the US, are now the rat isolated in the cage, only instead of being a rat in a cage, we're a person in a dark, empty room scrolling on our phone. And we're wondering why we're so unhappy. The solution is actually really easy. All you have to do is go outside. No in the woods required. You just take a small step outside. Outside your comfort zone, outside your house for a small hike. It's not this big dramatic fix. It's something small we do every day. And in my experience, when my PTSD was really bad, I started with 1 half-mile hike. And I just had to go once a week. And the whole time I could see my car because I was so paranoid and anxious. I didn't want to have my car out of sight. And slowly but surely, 1 hike at a time, 1 breath at a time, I found myself again. I found my joy and my resilience.
And I did that for so long, and I got so good at it and these other skills that one day a show called Naked and Afraid called me.
Find something outdoors that brings you some semblance of presence and joy, whether it's gardening, like I talk about in this video here, which completely transformed Pamela Anderson's sense of self-worth and her beauty standards just from gardening, or whether it's more like this video here where I decided to step out of my comfort zone and face my fear of heights on America's scariest and one of the top 3 deadliest trails. And wherever you are on your journey, I truly wish you happy, happy trails.